Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm your host, John Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF. And not only is it the IDP edition, but it's the John Cast edition of the pod this week, which luckily for all listening, that doesn't mean it's me going solo again like I did the second half of last week's show, but it means that I am joined by a fellow John, fellow IDP enthusiast from dynastynerds.com. The great John Glosser is here. Glosser, what's up, my friend?
Two Johns, one podcast, or one mic, however we phrased it last time or coined it last time. Looking forward to being back, and appreciate you having me on. A lot of insightful stuff all year out of you from this podcast, so super excited for you and to be on.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's been nice getting all different guests on from the world of IDP, and I've been very excited to get you on because, yeah, we usually talk rookie safeties in the off season, so we get to kind of spread our wings a little bit here and talk all teams, all positions, and go game by game. So I'm pretty excited, man. It'll be a lot of fun, and yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and getting the chance to drop your knowledge and your insight here heading into Week 13. But yeah, for everybody that doesn't know, we typically go game by game for these previews. I include the timestamps in the episode description as well for each game. So if you're looking for a specific game only, you could jump around and find those games. And basically what we're going to do, we're going to cover the main storylines for each team, focus on maybe favorite or least favorite matchups for every team as well. We're not going to necessarily talk about every single player either. We're not going to have to tell you, to start Foye Oluokun or anything like that. You should know that at this point in the season. But yeah, we'll have the matchup based visuals for the YouTube crowd as well. We'll put those up there. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. We really do appreciate that. It helps us a ton. And then yeah, I'm happy to answer start sit questions, interact with folks in the YouTube comments as well. I always check in there throughout the week. If there is questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and then I will include the link to my IDP rankings on PFF.com and the link to the PFF IDP fantasy report in the episode description as well. Yeah, so I'm excited to get into it. We got 6 teams on bye this week: Buffalo, Baltimore, Chicago, Minnesota, Las Vegas, and the Giants. So yeah, we're going to go into it here. But first things first, I do want to give a quick shout out to our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. As a parent, you've had to learn so many new skills to provide for your family, how to do copious amounts of laundry, meal plan for even the pickiest eater, and now how to protect your family's financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life provides an easy one-stop shop for your family's financial needs, offering high-quality term life insurance policies plus other financial solutions in one easy online hub. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy, meetfabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Insurance Company, not available in certain states, prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, John, let's start it off here with Thursday night football. It is the Seattle Seahawks at the Dallas Cowboys. Where would you like to start off in this game?
I guess we'll start off with the kind of linebacker situation going on in Dallas right now, with Marquise Bell and Damone Clark. Got Bell averaging over 47.5 snaps for the last month, kind of, coinciding with the LVE injury. I think he only had one game over 31 snaps before week 6, had one game over 10 plus points. From week 6 on, he's had double-digit points in 4 out of 6. Most of that is all due to the high-volume tackles. Things that I've noticed. There hasn't been too many impact plays for him. Clark probably the more trustable there, averaging just under 50 snaps per game, and also has had double-digit points in 8 of the last 9. So not an ideal matchup. Seattle not allowing great tackles per game to the linebacker position. As good as Dallas's defense has been this year, it's kind of been crappy for IDP managers just
Yeah.
because between blowouts and usage. Dan Quinn is a matchup based head coach, defensive coordinator if there is one in the league. So that has been kind of a frustrating piece. Outside of Deron Bland, who's the second coming of Deion Sanders. I think. There's been very, very little consistency there. I mean, obviously, we're not going to talk about your Micah Parsons. That's not a guy you're ever going to take out of your lineup. But if you're looking for linebacker, there is some heavy hitters on bye this week. You're losing, two top 15-ish linebackers in Baltimore and Patrick Queen and Roquan. Terrell Bernard's been an absolute savage this year. Missing a few of those guys. I think the Bears on bye this week too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're losing 2 there. So if you're looking for there, I mean, I think I'm trusting Clark a little bit more in this matchup just because of consistency, but probably a fade situation if you can afford it.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm a little bit higher on Damone Clark as well, but like again, Seattle giving up the 29th most tackles to the linebacker position. Like you said, these guys, they rotate in and out. It's not true every down rolls. There's always the potential for a blowout. So I have Clark, I think LB 38, Marquise Bell, LB 44. So a little bit lower. I know that Shaquille Leonard went in for a visit there as well in Dallas. Obviously not going to play this week. He hasn't even signed yet. He's going to be looking to maybe sign this weekend with somewhere, but it could be Dallas, could be Philly, somewhere. We'll see what happens there and we'll figure it out when that happens. But right now, yeah, Damone Clark and Marquise Bell are the two, but like you said, not overly trustworthy for IDP purposes. Other than that, it's kind of like the same thing with their safeties too, right? Like these guys rotate quite a bit. Like I still probably like Donovan Wilson the best, just because he's been the most kind of consistent as far as snaps and production. It's so up and down, right? And these guys don't play every down roles, so it's harder to bet on them. So I have him as like safety 29. He's the highest for me among these Cowboys. But anybody else on Dallas worth talking about for you?
No, I mean you do obviously like the rotation that's kind of going on amongst the defensive line. There is some like openings there, but it's really like spotty. You're not really, the same thing's happening amongst the defensive line and blowouts and stuff like that. Guys are just playing, different almost every week, and it's kind of obviously frustrating with not even the linebackers, but also to your point, the safeties is you're not really, those guys are not even on your deeper rosters are not cuttable because they do have those kind of, double digit games, but also it is at DB, which you feel like you could stream a little bit more, but it's tough. You don't want to cut a Donovan Wilson, watch him get, 20 points or so on another guy's roster. So it's, there's some frustration there. You also don't have the consistency of feeling like you could start them every week. So.
Yeah, for sure. And then you mentioned Deron Bland as well. Like we're pretty much starting him just because he's been a pick six god this season. We can't risk leaving a pick six on the bench. Not to say that he's going to get another one this season. You never know, but he's already got 5. So we liked him last week and more for the tackles more than anything. And he ended up with like 10 tackles as well as the pick 6. So we're leaving him in lineups. But yeah, other than that, I mean, the defensive line, it is what it is. It's kind of a messy group, and these guys all generate pressure because of the way that defense is, but picking who's going to get the sack each week has been a little bit tougher outside of Micah Parsons. We liked DeMarcus Lawrence last week, but he didn't get home, so he was a bit of a downer. But other than that, I mean, Osa Odighizuwa for DT required leagues has been pretty solid, but that is the Dallas Cowboys. So how about on the Seattle side of things? Obviously, we feel pretty good about Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks. They've been excellent all year, but anybody else on the Seahawks that you'd want to focus on?
I know prior to the last few weeks, Boye Mafe has been really solid this year, and he was riding like a 6-sack streak or something like that, some kind of unheard of numbers. But yeah, I mean, Wagner and Brooks are, goes without saying. I think both averaging over 8.5 tackles per game this year, both in like the top 10 or 12 of the entire league in total tackles. So the addition or return of Jamal Adams, I should say, is kind of, crapped on some of those Julian Love shares, but Julian Love is a really solid IDP. Witherspoon has been startable every week, definitely in your cornerback required leagues, and doing it in a multitude of ways. Tariq Woolen, I don't think I would touch. And then among the defensive line, I don't know. Seattle's really slumping too. I think like there's nobody there that you're really like confident in, even in like DT required. So there's not a whole lot there. I think if I'm leaning towards anything, it's probably, which safety you like the best considering how you're going to expect this game to go. And, obviously Witherspoon would probably be my, outside of Wagner and Brooks, probably be the guy I would lean towards the most. Jamal Adams playing an insane amount towards the line of scrimmage again, but it seems like he makes as many impact plays as he misses tackles. So if you're planning on watching, which is it being a primetime game, that might be a little frustrating for you if you decide to put him in there.
Yeah, it could be for sure. And yeah, we love the usage for Jamal Adams, but yeah, the production hasn't quite been there just yet. Although last week was decent against the 49ers, but it wasn't like amazing by any means, right? But I think he only played like one snap deep or something like that. He played the rest in the box and in the slot. So he's been, just lining up very close to the line of scrimmage. So we love that and hope that he's going to continue to deliver. And Dallas giving up the 8th most tackles per game to the safety position as well. So decent matchup. Julian Love, like you said, he's still playing around that 90% of snap range, and Quandre Diggs still playing an every down role. So they're happy to roll out 3 safeties on a pretty regular basis. Devin Witherspoon, he's I think CB1 for me this week, going against the Cowboys, 7th most tackles per game to the cornerback position. So he's been so good that hard to keep him out of lineups. Even last week in a bad matchup, he still was really solid. So you love to see that from your corners. And then like you said, I mean the edge, the defensive line, that these guys have been okay, not great. Boye Mafe probably the best of the bunch, just because, like you said, that sack streak was really nice. Probably going to go mostly against Terrence Steele this week. So Terrence Steele has a 44.2 pass blocking grade, which is 72nd out of 82 qualifying tackles. So could be a nice matchup there for Boye Mafe for those interested. But anything else from Seattle for you?
No, I know these Thursday games too. The narrative around fantasy football is we hate them.
Yes.
So both teams kind of not on a short week, which is at least like some sort of saving grace there because they both did play last Thursday. But just tough. I mean, if you're deciding between, a safety that you might like that's playing, on Sunday and, Jamal Adams or Julian Love, sometimes we will defer to that. I don't want to put all my eggs in the early basket until you see a guy have a big game and then you're like, damn, why didn't I start him? So,
that's always how it works.
Not a great neither on either side. Like the matchup just isn't like one where it's worth kind of like putting that risk out there of saying like so and so is top against certain positions. So I think that will kind of lead a lot of fades in this matchup, especially amongst the defensive line.
Yeah, and like you said, the Thursday games, they're so weird. I can't stand Thursday night football. As much as like we always like want more football and we love watching football on any day of the week, for every time Thursday night football rolls around, I'm on the abolish Thursday night football train because it's been rough to watch. And then the injuries and players being poor and leaving those duds in your fantasy lineup as well it's been rough. So let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons at the New York Jets, and let's start with the Jets this time, because I want to talk about Quinnen Williams. So Quinnen Williams, we talked about him quite a few times on this podcast, but having a relatively quiet year, at least for IDP purposes, just 2 sacks on the year, right? He had 12 in 2022, so obviously some regression there, but I think the more interesting thing, so looking into it, like Quinnen Williams is having a career year in terms of pass rush win rate and pressure rate. So a 16.1% pass rush win rate, which is elite for an interior defensive lineman, and a 13.1% pressure rate, also a very high end range. So I think that is really kind of the things that we're looking for. Obviously, we talk about it all the time, but you want those underlying metrics. And I think it's a great sign that he'll be able to deliver those sacks in the near future. And I think this week's matchup against the Falcons is a great time for that to happen. Going up against Desmond Ridder, who owns a 24.8% pressure to sack conversion rate. That is the 5th highest in the league, or 5th worst, to make it a little simpler. But it even has the help for potential strong floor this week too, just in case he doesn't get that sack again, because the Falcons are yielding the 2nd most tackles per game to opposing defensive linemen at 21.7 this season. You got Quinnen Williams ranked tied for 13th among defensive linemen who have played at least 50% of snaps in tackle efficiency so far this season as well. So everything about Quinnen Williams, other than that, the sack numbers have been excellent this year, right? And even without the sack numbers, still one of the top scoring IDPs at his position. So for those that have been frustrated by him for any reason, I think you just keep rolling him out there because he's so good. And I think that we're going to start to see those sacks this year. Other than that, I mean, look, CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams, we know what we're getting from these guys. They're both potentially top 10 linebackers. It's a nice matchup too. Atlanta's given up the 8th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. At safety, I kind of like Jordan Whitehead this week. Jordan Whitehead, I have as safety 13. He's on pace for over 100 total tackles, which would be the first time in his career that he would hit that mark. He had 87 last year in a 17-game season. So really like Jordan Whitehead this week. He's safety 13 for me. But don't love the corners. That's really the only thing. DJ Reed can be a nice streamable option, but he's like CB24 for me. Sauce Gardner, I'm not putting in there. He just doesn't get targeted enough to really trust on a consistent basis. But anything for you from the Jets side of things?
I do like the matchup for the Jets IDPs going up against Atlanta. You spoke to a ton of those points. CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams are just smash starts every week. You're not, there's nothing there that we're going to tell you that's going to help you. I mean, if you got those guys on your roster, you're playing them, barring an injury. Whitehead, I had a good note on Whitehead too. Very almost like a hidden gem, for IDP, especially amongst DBs. It seems like every year we're, lack consistency there, but he's had 68 tackles or more in 6 straight seasons, and I think he's on pace for a 200-point fantasy season. So, I mean, he's doing well. I think, at least 2 picks in almost every season of his career. Maybe his rookie year is the only one. And he's had at least 6 tackles in the last 4 of the 5 games. And I think 2 of them might have been 9 tackle games, if I'm not mistaken. So, he's been solid. I mean, 3 of his 4 picks this year came against Josh Allen in week 1. So I don't know how, you're talking like a 35-point week there or something like that. So, but yeah, he's been really solid there. Quinnen Williams is, just to kind of, wrap up that point for you. He's one of those rare ones that, your JJ Watt in his prime, Aaron Donald, even defensive tackle premium, take that out of it. You're starting him as an IDP defensive lineman every week. The dip, I mean, I think a lot of it too it's to be expected, right? We're not expecting everyone to be. I mean, we call Aaron Donald the 1 of 1 for a reason, getting 20 sacks from the interior. But Quinnen Williams has been as good as advertised. I think the Jets have been dealing with a lot of kind of BS on that team, and it is sad to see that defense kind of regress a little bit, but I think a lot of it is due to what's going on the offensive side. So, but yeah, I do like the potential for a smash game this week from him. Atlanta is, especially with Sauce Gardner taking away Drake London, it's just when you make Atlanta one-dimensional, which they kind of want to be anyway. I think it's it's going to be a key point for these, your Quinnen Williams and honestly your linebackers here, I think, to kind of smash this week. So love that matchup for them. I'm not overly excited about anyone else. For the stat point of Ridder kind of giving up all those pressures. I mean, Bryce Huff has been a spot start guy, but you're not going to get the snaps there, so you are really banking on the sack. Like, he will need the sack. He's not gonna be a high volume tackler, even though Atlanta is giving up second most tackles to defensive linemen. Like, I just Bryce Huff is on his way to having a career year and to rip off another NFL team at some point in free agency. But in spot starts, if you need a guy and you're really up against it, he's probably a guy that's still out there on your waiver wire or even in your deeper leagues because the usage just isn't there.
Yeah, he's definitely still a situational pass rusher. Getting a little bit more snaps this year, but yeah, you're really not getting the floor that you are with like a Quinnen Williams or even like a Jermaine Johnson potentially, who's playing a little bit more, but should draw Jake Matthews this week, who's been a really good pass blocker. So that makes it a tougher matchup for Jermaine Johnson. That's why I got him as edge 26 this week. So on the Falcons side of things, I guess we'll start with their linebackers because last week I was pretty excited about Nate Landman. I thought it was a really nice matchup for him. I thought he had potential there to have a nice, like, kind of on the fringe of an LB1 type game, but unfortunately his snaps dipped again. This has happened a couple times this year where he's played like 100% game or 95% game and then drops down to 75%. That's exactly what happened this past week. He dropped down to like 74% or something like that. So it makes him harder to trust, right? He's been very, very efficient when he's on the field, but if he's not on the field, he could only do with what he's been given, right? So he drops outside of those top 30 linebackers for me. He's LB 33 this week. Still startable in those deeper leagues, but we're looking for volume more than anything here, and there's no guarantee that Landman's going to get it. So Caden Ellis comes a bit ahead of him again this week, since he isn't really losing snaps. That doesn't happen for him. So he's LB 24 for me this week, but yeah, not overly excited about Landman anymore. He burned me, and yeah, I'm going to have some trust issues with him from now on. But other than that, the safeties are really interesting for Atlanta because Jesse Bates has been amazing this year. He's been an elite safety all season, on pace for a new career high in total tackles. He's also got 4 interceptions on the season, including a pick 6 this past week. However, Bates is kind of due for a down week, right? Especially as a safety that lines up primarily deep. 72% of his snaps coming from a deep alignment. Variance at the defensive back position basically does not discriminate against any player. And this could be a week, I think, to temper expectations for what's been a top 5 IDP safety this season. Atlanta faces the Jets, whose offense has been abysmal all year, and as a result, they're yielding the least tackles per game to the safety position at 9.6. So per game. I think that is a recipe for a lower week for Jesse Bates, assuming he doesn't get another pick 6. So I have him as safety 20, definitely still startable, but you definitely want to temper expectations this week. And the other piece of it is Richie Grant. So he comes down all the way at safety 50 for me this week. And that is specifically because of reduced playing time. He saw his snaps cut down pretty significantly this past week, which is concerning for sure, because he had been a really good IDP. He had been solid producer, solid tackle efficiency, but 75% of snaps this past week. I couldn't find anything on an injury or anything like that. So it looked like they were giving DeMarco Helms a little bit more work this past week as well. So for that reason, I think Richie Grant is an avoid for me this week, right? These are crucial weeks of the fantasy season. So don't want to mess around with limited snaps for the safety position when so many other guys play 100% of snaps. So yeah, that's kind of my bit on the safeties there. Anything else for the Falcons for you?
No, it's a bad matchup, and to your point of these weeks becoming so crucial and trying to optimize and getting like the most out of your lineup. Atlanta ranks about bottom 5 in everything in terms of tackles to IDPs. Nate Landman, I mean, that sucked. I think he was riding a 7 straight weeks of at least 10 fantasy points in every game. So, he was looking like that every down sneaky linebacker that you got off of waivers, to kind of save your season there. I'm kind of hoping this one was more towards the, Caden Ellis revenge game type of narrative there against the Saints. But yeah, I think the one thing that Arthur Smith has done is he's taken the crown from Bill Belichick for, hating fantasy football the most on both sides. So just the randomness of losing snaps, and there just hasn't been much there. I mean, I do love Jesse Bates, but the fact that you're probably looking at Tim Boyle, who's maybe going to even attempt less than 5 passes downfield, or Jesse Bates would even have an opportunity to intercept a pass is kind of, not enticing. And again, to your point of these weeks being so crucial, is like, unless you're in a real bind, I know we got some, again, those big hitters on bye, but I think you can find some production there that's a little bit more consistent, even, on waivers potentially, than kind of starting a guy in a matchup where you're going to be frustrated.
Yeah, I am. Just not interested in messing around with this kind of stuff this week. It's too risky at this point in the season. And yeah, Tim Boyle, like you said, that is kind of the biggest concern for this Jets offense now. It was Zach Wilson, but at least Zach Wilson would take some shots every once in a while, even though they weren't very accurate. There was at least the opportunity there, but don't love it this week. So the corners for Atlanta don't love the defensive line. It's really kind of a mid defensive line, right? Like Bud Dupree is not good. Arnold Ebiketie is still kind of developing there. He's not quite shown a ton of promise. David Onyemata is probably the best of the bunch as far as like interior guys go. 76.7 pass rush grade this year. The Jets offensive line is really, really poor right now. There's not a lot of guys that are actually doing well, and Tim Boyle is somebody that has definitely taken a lot of sacks already in his few appearances this season. So for DT required leagues, don't mind a David Onyemata, but other than that, I'm not messing with too much with the Falcons IDPs this week. All right, let's go to the next game on the list, the Arizona Cardinals at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Where do you want to start with this one, John?
We could start on the Pittsburgh side. I mean, just a caveat to the entire game here is it's just, I think we're down 3 of the top kind of 4 linebackers that should have been in this matchup. So it has been a rough season at linebacker for IDP managers of trying to, hope and pray that your guys aren't getting injured on a regular basis. I think the biggest thing on the Pittsburgh side is, Minkah Fitzpatrick being back would be a grand slam. I think this is a plus matchup for him. Obviously, the Steelers have been getting by. Firing Matt Canada was a huge boost to every level of, every phase of the game for them. But yeah, Minkah coming back, he's Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's rock solid. He's as good as advertised and produces for you. Landon Roberts has been next man up, next man up, but has found a way to be semi-consistent here. I think he's 5 straight with at least 12 fantasy points. It's a high volume tackle situation where there's legitimately just nobody left. You're playing in front of a very decent front, with TJ Watt and Highsmith and Cam Hayward back. So, the opportunity for tackles are there. I think he's had some bigger weeks than last week. Similar to the Tim Boyle point, Jake Browning taking over that Cincinnati offense has really hindered the opportunities there on the IDP side. But, now on this one, you got Kyler Murray, who they're going to move the ball. So I think Landon Roberts is a sneaky start. I'll be interested to see where you kind of have him amongst linebackers this week. I think last week might have been his worst game since the injuries happened there. But yeah, there isn't a ton there. Joey Porter Jr. actually stepping up has kind of sucked on the IDP side because he's been so good that it's, as a rookie, it's like teams aren't even going after him. And having Levi Wallace in there was nice because that guy seems like a target machine where he's always leaving somebody open. So, but yeah, it's there isn't a ton there. This Pittsburgh team is just full of a lot of like waiver wire guys from an IDP perspective. So, you can still go in and see a DeMonte Casey on waivers and you're like, do I? So looking for spot starts there. There's just not a ton to be excited about on the Pittsburgh side, in my opinion.
Yeah, not a ton to be excited about, and yeah, we'll see if Minkah Fitzpatrick comes back. If not, it means probably DeMonte Casey plays the 100% snap role again, and then we got to mix in a Trenton Thompson as well, which it is what it is, but it's not like somebody you're super excited about, even though it is a decent matchup. But if Minkah's back, that's where you could feel a little bit better about this thing. And then I have a Landon Roberts as LB 20 this week, so he's been 100% snap guy since the injuries. He's been efficient when he wasn't 100% snap. He's come down to earth, obviously, with more snaps as expected, but still very solid, like you said. And then, TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, Alex Highsmith, these guys are all playing. I did want to mention too with Highsmith, he's another one of those guys dealing with some regression this year, 4.5 sacks on the season, despite is another one also having a career year in terms of some of his pass rush metrics. 84.2 pass rush grade. That's inside the top 12 at his position. He's also got a career high 16.7% win rate, 14% pressure rate. So look, 14.5 sacks last season obviously set the bar very high for people, but he hasn't quite delivered this year as far as sacks, but still really solid, getting a lot of other miscellaneous stats in there, tackles as well. So we knew he was due for regression, but I think, we can expect him to kind of bounce back. If not this year, could be a nice buy low candidate for those dynasty leagues heading into 2024 as well.
Hard playing with TJ Watt.
It is, yeah. TJ Watt is a bit of a sack hog, that guy. So, yeah, he can either create some sacks for you, or he's in there quick enough to take them away before anybody else. So, it's definitely a tougher situation to kind of work out at times. But yeah, still like Highsmith quite a bit. I think I have him as edge 6 this week actually. So feel pretty good about him. And then on the Arizona side of things, anywhere you want to start with these IDPs? There's not a ton of exciting guys here.
No, I mean your Buda Baker's, he's going to start every week for you. He's been amazing since coming back. More consistent than I think we've seen in quite some time. Zaven Collins still kind of always wants to draw you in, but the production is never there. It's almost the name value because it's a guy who played linebacker, and you're thinking you're getting a cheat code now that he's a defensive lineman, but it's a lot more letdown than kind of. The other side of it. Josh Woods is probably your most consistent play there at linebacker. Mm-hmm. He's been dealing with nagging injuries, and I don't think he's quite the player that we want him to be. Losing Kaiser White obviously was a killer there because that was, he was having a consistent year. And amongst that defensive line, it's just almost like pick your poison every week. I mean, I've maybe added and dropped Dennis Gardeck about 12 times this year. Ledbetter there as well. Like, there's just a few guys that, on a weekly basis, if you're looking at, a team that gives up a lot of sacks or a lot of pressures, you're in a tough bind. Defensive line is, although it's been a lot better in Dynasty than it has in years past, it's still a wasteland if you don't have one of those top guys. So, this is one of those matchups where I don't expect a ton of offense, but it might be, ugly on the defensive side too, because you might, you just don't have those guys giving you those consistent numbers. And again, with the playoffs coming up and all that, you just don't really want to risk a matchup like that, kind of putting up a 0 or something for you and really costing you a chance at a playoff position, or, even, a chance at a total points championship or something like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think it is. I think really Buda Baker is kind of the main one for me as well. I think safety 12, I have him at this week. He's got a 10.9% tackle efficiency, which is top 24 among all defensive backs. So like you said, just been really solid. Josh Woods hasn't been Kaiser White, but he's still playing 100% of snaps. But like you said, don't love the matchup necessarily this week. So he's LB 26 for me. And then I'm just not really messing around too much with the guys. Jalen Thompson's been fine as a maybe low end safety too. But BJ Ojolari, Cameron Thomas, Zaven Collins, the Pittsburgh offensive line hasn't been great, but Kenny Pickett hasn't necessarily taken a lot of sacks either, right? So you're really kind of rolling the dice on these guys who haven't shown amazing pass rush metrics by any means. Dennis Gardeck has probably been actually the best of the bunch, but again, not a ton of snaps there either. So it makes it really hard to kind of trust these guys. But I think that pretty much covers the Cardinals. So let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts at the Tennessee Titans. And I want to let's start with Indianapolis here, because Obviously, they released Shaquille Leonard. We saw that. And so kind of the fallout from that has been that obviously Zaire Franklin stays in an every down role. That didn't change. But EJ Speed stepped into a near every down role this past week with the release of Leonard. So I think he played 95% of snaps, somewhere around there. But I think that keeps him in starting consideration in most lineups. The only problem is this week against the Titans, they are giving up the fewest tackles per game to the linebacker position. So don't love that. Just 14.5 tackles per game to linebackers, and that's just 11 over the past three games. 11 per game over the past three, and Zaire Franklin is there. You feel fine about him. He's been the second most efficient tackler at the linebacker position this season with a 16.6% tackle efficiency. That doesn't leave like a ton of opportunities for somebody like an EJ Speed, who has been a below average tackler at the position this season at 11.2%. So I have EJ Speed LB 29 this week. Despite the nice boost in snaps, it's just not the best matchup for him. So comes in a little bit lower for me this week. And then pretty much, I mean, Kenny Moore, you're starting him, even though it's, again, not a great matchup. Kenny Moore has just been so solid. He always kind of seems to find a way, so he's still starting for me. But Julian Blackmon, I think he's safety 18 for me this week. The only reason he stays kind of in that startable range is 46% of his snaps in the box this year. He's just been up and around that line of scrimmage where we'd like him to be and getting those tackles. So that also could potentially hurt EJ Speed as well. Having that safety that's in the box so often just puts another body in there to compete with for tackles. So yeah, that's kind of the Colts. I mean, DeForest Buckner is the other one too. Obviously, he's starting. We don't have to talk too much about him. But anybody for Indianapolis for you that you'd want to talk about?
No, I think you're going to the top three there. Zaire Franklin could probably be in the worst matchup imaginable, and he's still going to find a way to get 12 tackles. So, the EJ Speed experiment will be interesting. I know you had someone on a few weeks ago, and he was kind of talking about the Gus Bradley system and how it's really just about like thumpers. You know what I mean? Like the sideline to sideline linebackers aren't really going to thrive in that system. So it'll be interesting to see the usage on EJ Speed. In a matchup like this, I think it's a complete fade for me because that Zaire, outside of a Zaire injury, and even then, like it's not going to be the EJ Speed show. So, but yeah, DeForest Buckner, obviously that's a must start every single week. And then Kenny Moore, cornerback required. I know even in non-cornerback required, Kenny Moore's putting up some numbers at times that will absolutely swing a matchup in your favor. So, the rotation among the defensive line is rough. Kwity Paye's, had some moments. Ibukams had some moments. It's, but the consistency there is, I mean, if you're choosing between, let's go back to the Thursday game of like a Boye Mafe or, Darrell Taylor or something like that, or one of these guys, I mean, I might lean more towards the Colts matchup just because I think it's a bit more favorable, and the fact that it's not on the dreaded Thursday. So, but yeah, these are not smash starts in any way, shape, or form, but you do have two quarterbacks in this one, especially that are turnover prone. So, you could look to that part of the matchup, but I'm not super comfortable starting these guys if I'm looking to, make sure I'm trying to score points and win matchups.
Yeah. It's tough. Like there's 6 teams on a bye, injuries now at the position too. Like we may get to a point where we got to be putting Kwity Paye. I mean, I'm somebody that has to put Kwity Paye into a lineup this week because I lost Jalen Phillips, which is obviously a huge bummer. But Kwity Paye, it's like he's edged 36 for me this week. Like he's just, I mean, a 57.8 pass rush grade on the year. So nothing like super encouraging there, unfortunately. The best thing about Kwity Paye for this week is that he's going up against Dylan Radins, the right tackle there for the Tennessee Titans, 44.1 pass blocking grade on the season. So he has not been very good. So that's the one thing that I kind of like in Kwity Paye's favor this week. But it's again, it's kind of a pick your poison, hope for the best between him, Samson Ebukam, Deo Odeangbo. But yeah, I probably probably leaning Ebucam. God, maybe Kwity Paye this week if I have to pick one. It's tough, but yeah, at least there's maybe some potential there in the matchup. Hopefully, Kwity Paye could get home for my sake and help me feel better about losing Jalen Phillips in one of my main leagues. So I think that pretty much covers the Colts. So let's do the Tennessee Titans here again. Another team that isn't, overly exciting necessarily for IDP purposes, outside of, Jeffrey Simmons and DT required leagues, who's been solid, excellent. Danico Autry, Harold Landry, those guys have been nice edge 2 options as well. Azeez Al-Shaair, the lone every down linebacker there. He's LB12 for me this week. The Colts giving up the 12th most tackles to the linebacker position, but not interested in anybody else at that linebacker spot in Tennessee. Jack Gibbons playing less than 50% of snaps lately, so you just want to avoid that. The only other thing, Kayvon Wallace at safety. He was with the Cardinals earlier in the year. They released him. He had been a solid IDP, really, really good tackle efficiency, 12.2% tackle efficiency, which is 8th best among defensive backs this year. He started to see some increased snaps. He actually started last game alongside Amani Hooker, but it wasn't a full every down role. So that's the one thing to kind of keep an eye on, is when he gets those 100% of snaps, then you feel a little bit better about putting him into lineups. But I think it was like 74% or somewhere around there. So someone to keep an eye on, because he has been so efficient with his opportunities. But yeah, Colts giving up the 3rd most tackles to the defensive line position as well. I should mention that. So for those guys like Jeffrey Simmons, Danico Autry, and Harold Landry. But anybody else on Tennessee worth talking about for you?
No, Wallace, I like the kind of comeback story there for him, because I think he was like 5 straight games. Buddha was out, I think, after week 1 or halfway through week 1 or something like that. And like 5 straight games of like at least like 12 to 15 fantasy points per game. Kind of a surprising cut there. All things considered, especially with how rough they are at linebacker. But, nice to kind of see him bounce back and bring some value to some teams. I mean, he's really that increased snaps is from Terrell Edmunds, but Terrell Edmunds is terrible. So I don't understand why Wallace couldn't dominate that snap share, even when Edmunds was back. I do like a kind of a excuse me, potential smash week from Harold Landry. I know he's had 50 snaps and 50 plus snaps in 3 straight, and I think 18 tackles and 1 sack over that 3-game stretch, which is kind of nice for Landry there. I know still recovering from that ACL, has had some kind of boom weeks, but has had some duds in there too. So with the matchup being a little bit plus on the tackle side, if you do get that sack too, you got that potential for that 20-point week from him. So those are nice to have, because people are kind of fading a lot of this Tennessee defense. Amani Hooker has been a pretty big letdown this year. I was, especially after the Buyer trade, I was definitely expecting one of those big seasons. I know he's dealt with some injuries and a concussion in there as well. But yeah, the tackle floor is nowhere near as safe as I thought it should be with a player of his caliber, and especially with Kayvon Wallace coming in, who is much better than from an efficiency rating, I think, than Terrell Edmunds is. So but and I mean, the Azeez dominating is really nice to see too. A guy who was kind of hidden in San Fran for some years, and kind of outshined by Dre Greenlaw, and kind of lost that second that Robin role to Fred Warner. It's nice to kind of see him kind of come and make his own superhero role here in Tennessee. And I mean, those Monty Rice, Jack Gibbons, those guys are not good or getting the playing time that they deserve or have earned or whatever. So the last guy I'll speak to there is probably Sean Murphy Bunting. I do like him. He's been solid this year, solid when he was in Tampa Bay too. Assuming that he's probably going to get a bulk of the share against Michael Pittman, who has just been an absolute target machine this year. I think he's up there with Diggs and Tyreek Hill and the most targeted guys, Keenan Allen, those type of guys. So pretty big opportunity for him there. So if you're looking for cornerback required, not just in this matchup, but specifically in this matchup, kind of that might be a sneaky start there for you.
Yeah, I like it. I like the streaming option there for Murphy Bunting. He has been solid, and yeah, hopefully he's back in the lineup this week too. I think because he came back last week, so he
Yeah.
was good to go. Yeah, I like it, and yeah, that pretty much does it for that game. So let's go to the next game on the list here: Denver Broncos at the Houston Texans. Where do we want to start with this one, John?
We could start on the Denver side there with your, Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell combo, the
Yes,
tackle
sir.
monsters. Alex Singleton has just been a godsend, for IDP managers. I mean, I think 8 games this season. I think I charted with 10 tackles or more.
Mhm.
Really odd that like he's kind of the one, given being the free agent of the two, kind of the one of kind of coming in and dominating the high volume tackles. I
Yeah.
know that's his game, but Jewel's been decent, kind of having I think he's got 4 impact plays since week 8. So really not the high volume tackler that we've had from Josie Jewell in the past, but kind of nice that he's still, becoming a relevant IDP starter with some of those impact plays. 10th most tackles per game Houston's allowing to linebackers. I'm beating a dead horse here, but everyone as impressed as possible with this Houston offense, just moving the
Yeah.
ball up and down the field, both running and passing. Seems like they're never out of a game. So I would expect, not breaking news here, those linebackers that both should do pretty well, but Alex Singleton's got to be, top 5 IDP linebacker every single week at this point. Um, your cornerback, that's a solid matchup for your cornerbacks there too. But I don't, when you have a Patrick Surtain type player, it does really kind of leave a lot to be desired. Teams don't typically go after those guys.
Mhm.
Last piece there I have is the Jonathan Cooper, Nick Benito combo there. Cooper has definitely been a safe tackle floor, 5+ tackles in 50% of his games this season. Not sure if he's still inside the top 12 defensive line, but I think he was at midseason there. He's been really, really solid. Benito is more like sack dependent. You're not getting the usage out of him. It's a little bit of an expanded Bryce Huff type role where he's playing somewhere in the 20 to 30 snap range, but he's getting a sack or, forced fumble or something like that. That's kind of making him more fantasy relevant. So, Houston giving up the 8th most tackles to defensive linemen. So I do love Jonathan Cooper, another guy who's a young player who's really kind of flying under the radar. And I don't know if we're giving him enough respect for, the production that he's producing. And Justin Simmons is just, a guy who won't go away. Seems like he's not gonna get you those big tackles, but those impact plays is anytime you want to fade him, he's gonna get one, and it's typically against your top tier quarterbacks. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm not super high on him this week with a pretty rough matchup to safeties. So, what do you got on the Denver side?
Yeah, I think it was just basically the safeties that I wanted to kind of focus on. I think you covered everything else really well. And yeah, Justin Simmons, I think I have safety 25. The other guy there is PJ Locke, who's filling in for the suspended Kareem Jackson, right? So I have PJ Locke as safety 31 this week. I think people are going to be going after him on waiver wires after a really good game in week 12 against the Browns. He posted, I think, 7 tackles, a sack. He had a forced fumble in there. But he hasn't, or at least he isn't necessarily like a must start option for me this week. He played 74% of snaps. I think more importantly than anything else, those snaps are key, right? So we want those 100% snap guys. 74% is a bit concerning. I know he came out of the game a little bit too, but not enough or because of injury, but there was at least some of this that was part of the game plan too. So I think PJ Locke comes in a little bit lower for me, and then the Texans. They've yielded just 12.6 tackles per game to the safety position, so that's 22nd. So it's not necessarily a player that IDP managers need to chase production at the position in such a crucial week here for fantasy again. So he's fine to have on rosters, and if he gets up to that 100% snap share, could be somebody that we like in matchup based plays. But this week a little bit lower on PJ Locke. And then, so let's move to the Houston Texans side of things because they're always interesting. I'm curious, what's your take on this linebacker situation? Because Denzel Perryman is expected back this week after serving his 2-game suspension, right?
I hate it. When you have situations like we kind of spoke about a little bit before in Arizona and Pittsburgh, it's like, can I get one of these guys over there? You know what I mean? And kind of give me some more fantasy relevance. But, you know, you got Denzel Perryman and Blake Cashman and, Tuatu, and you have Christian Harris, and it's like, feel like guys are just kind of like buried out there, but it's spot starts. I mean, from a dynasty perspective, we want to start the rookies and the second year guys, and Harris and Tuatu, and we got Blake Cashman getting 10 tackle games out here on us. So and Denzel Perryman coming back. I'm just concerned of what's gonna look like, even to the Denver side of like when Kareem Jackson comes back. I know he's your veteran, like Perriman, but like, what do you do at that point? You know what I mean? Like, you got a guy who's been suspended multiple times for kind of feeling like he's a caveman in the game, and now it's like, do you move towards some of these younger guys who are willing to are going to make a bigger impact for you down the line? So, but Perriman back is, kind of a killer in that situation. It seems like Christian Harris has been coming on a little bit over these past couple of weeks as well. Tuatu, I know, has been I think he dealt with a concussion there, so I'm not sure how much he actually played last week. But it's a rough situation among the linebackers, and it is a plus matchup, but it's when you have those guys returning, it's like, are you expecting Perriman to play 100%? I can't say that with confidence right now that I'm expecting that. And when we get even into that 75% range, it impacts drastically what we're projecting. So, Perriman is going to be your high volume tackler. That's where where it's his bread and butter. It's where he's going to make his money. But if it's not there, you know what I mean? Like, you're kind of projecting based off of what we expect him to do. But when you have some of these young guys being rotated in, it's and Houston's winning games, or they're competitive in all these games. So I don't love that situation. It's not a complete fade for me, but I would really have to dig into numbers and projections and what it'll probably be almost like a game time call there. So I don't love it. Obviously, the safety matchup there is not sweet as well, but Jalen Petrie has been pretty electric.
Yeah, we lost John there for a second. Oh, you're back. Good. Oh, you lost the audio, but yeah, you're mentioning Jalen Petrie. And you've lost audio, John. But Jalen Petrie, safety, I got him a safety 11 this week. He played about 45% of snaps in the box last week, which was definitely a shift from his typical deep safety role. So I think that's something more to kind of keep in mind here going forward. And it's not necessarily like a great matchup for safeties, like John mentioned before he cut out there. 27th most tackles per game to the safety position, but 15.0 per game over the last 3 games, which has been a positive for Petrie, or at least for opposing players against the Texans, or against the Broncos, that is. So could be a nice matchup here for Petrie after all, if that trend kind of continues there. And then the other thing, like John was mentioning, just to kind of follow up on the linebackers, the way that I'm kind of treating this group, with Denzel Perriman coming back, is I'm pretty sure it's going to affect Christian Harris more than it's going to affect Blake Cashman. So I have Blake Cashman kind of in that low end LB2 range. Christian Harris, I've dropped out of the top 36. Denzel Perriman's outside of the top 36 as well, as is Henry To'o. So, John, I think you might be back with us now. You dropped out there for a second, but
my apologies.
No, all good. It happens. This is what technology does. It likes to test us, right? So, appreciate you figuring out. But yeah, I was just following up on Petrie, where I had him this week, and yeah, kind of with you there in that he has been better here as of late, and then just wrapping up my thoughts on the Texans linebackers. But I'll let you kind of finish up your thoughts there.
Yeah, that linebacker situation just a little muddy. Petrie, I think you're still starting that guy, but I do think that we need to temper expectations and just not make guys DB1 going into the season anymore, because hurt us with our favorite Derwin last year, and now it seems like it's got Petrie this year. So but yeah, I mean, great players, but we're just going to leave them off of our DB1 overall list, and that way they can produce for us.
Yeah, you have to.
Among defensive linemen there, I just don't. I mean, I love Will Anderson as a player, but the production's just not there. Greenard's been all right, but this matchup's just horrible. Second worst in the league. So I'm not really overly excited to kind of start anyone here. Name value alone, I think a lot of us just get suckered into the draft capital we spent on Will Anderson. So he's gonna kind of make his way into our lineups, more often than not because of how thin the position is. But if there's options here, to get somebody in there to start for you this week in a spot start, I'd probably be looking to do that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And the Broncos offensive line has been pretty solid this year, I would say. Russell Wilson does still have a tendency to take sacks, obviously. So that's kind of the positive thing there for guys like a Will Anderson or even potentially Jonathan Greenard in deeper leagues. But it's not necessarily the best matchup, especially for the floor. Like you said, the 31st most tackles per game to the defensive line position. So that does hurt these guys' potential as well. So anything else from this game, John, or do you want to move on to our next one on the list?
I think I'm wrapped up. I'm good here.
Nice. All right, let's move to the Miami Dolphins at the Washington Commanders, and I'll start with the Commanders side of things here. Because Cody Barton did end up returning last week coming off of IR and immediately stepped back into an every down role, which was key for him, right? And it pushed Jamin Davis back down the depth chart to more of a part-time role there, which obviously a bummer for Jamin Davis, former first overall pick and somebody who'd kind of been holding down that every down role. They just don't seem to really want him in that spot, and he's probably not going to be sticking around in Washington if I had to guess. So we'll see what happens to him going forward, but that's beside the point. But Barton has been the Commanders' most efficient tackler this season as well, just around league average, 13.5%. Didn't have like the best game last week, 6 total tackles. I think this is a chance for him to have a better game. The Dolphins have been a below average opponent in yielding tackles per game to the linebacker position on the year at 15.5, but that number has actually been a top 5 rate over the past 3 games at 19.7 tackles per game to the linebacker position. So that could be a trend in the right direction there for somebody like Cody Barton as the Commanders' lone every down linebacker. So I have him as LB17 this week and kind of like his potential as a startable linebacker here again. And then other than that, Cam Curl, Miami's given up the 5th most tackles per game to the safety position. Cam Curl has been solid all season long. He's safety 2 for me. Benjamin St. Juste and Kendall Fuller also startable there at the cornerback position. Those guys have been solid. The defensive line, it's not a great matchup because Miami's offensive line has been pretty good. Tua has been decent at avoiding sacks as well. So it's really only Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne that I'd be interested in. And that's for, those DT required leagues. I think Jonathan Allen's DT 9 for me, Daron Payne, DT 17, Daron Payne, another one of those guys dealing with regression this year, but he's also doesn't have the pass rush metrics either to kind of back up the potential for him to kind of get better as far as sacks go. So that's a bit concerning for Payne. And that's why he comes in a little bit lower for me this week.
Yeah, I think you hit it with the Commander side there. Barton coming back. We got that little whatever it was 2 to 4 game stretch where Jamin Davis was going to be a thing again, but it turns into very Isaiah Simmons-y where we feel like now's the time and it's not the time. He did have a couple nice games in there, but like you said, it doesn't seem like he's in the long-term plans there for Washington. So it looks like they're ready to give up on that first round selection of him. Barton's gonna, he's just got the consistent tackle floor. That was kind of the, hiding him in Seattle there for a few years. It seemed like that was what we kind of wanted from him. The injury sucked because he was playing at a really consistent rate there for a while. So nice to have him back, and hopefully he can stick around for the end of the season here for IDP managers trying to make that, push. Cam Curl has just been great. I think he had 1 dud all season, maybe like a 3 to 4 tackle game or something like that. But yeah, amazing matchup this week. I believe he has 2 20-point games and 1 30-point game this week or this year already. So Curl's one of those type of players, that rare ones that you get at the safety position, is as much of a streamable position as it is that can really swing a matchup in your favor. So and the fact that he does it really without impact plays is really awesome because when those those plays do start coming, you know he's got that potential for those boom weeks. And yeah, I'm with you. St. Juice is, arguably one of the most terrible corners in the game because he just gets targeted so much. But leads to some tackles, so
Yeah.
that's not bad. Seems like teams have it in the game plan to go after him. So Fuller as well has been solid this year. He's definitely better. But amongst the D line, yeah, your defensive tackle premium leagues, you're looking at your Payne and Allen there, but without the key edge rushers on the end, losing both Sweat and Chase Young, seems like the Commanders are headed towards a little bit of, kind of an Atlanta approach on offense where they got the young quarterback and they're just going to try to bring in weapons on that side of it and let the defense fall into place. After, for the past decade, just drafting nothing but defense, it seemed like with those early picks.
Yeah.
It's not a good situation there. I know, KJ Henry's played in spots, but nothing like, you're talking 7 to 10 snaps. So you're not really getting much there. So those guys, from a metric standpoint, I didn't know how poor that some of them were performing. So, but yeah, it's being not a good matchup, and the fact that, the offensive approach is to take them out, it's not gonna probably not gonna be a great week for either of them. So Barton probably, Curl obviously top 2 DB. I'm totally aligned with that. And Barton I would expect to be, pretty solid linebacker this week, even given the matchup, because I don't expect Miami to, struggle too much on offense in this game.
Yeah, I'd imagine that Miami should be able to have their way on offense here, and yeah, maybe that'll lead to some more points there for our guys, Cam Curl, the cornerbacks as well. So, on the Miami IDP side of things, obviously, yeah, we mentioned it before, but Jalen Phillips done for the year, obviously with the torn Achilles. So hopefully he gets back, because that is a huge bummer. He was excellent here in the past few weeks. Even had a really nice game before he got injured on Thanksgiving or Good Friday, I guess. So, or Black Friday, not Good Friday. It was a bad Friday.
Bad Friday.
But yeah, other than that, Bradley Chubb is another one of those guys, I think, having one of the best seasons of his career in terms of pass rush grade, 79.3. Pass rush win rate 14.7%, pressure rate 13.4%. All of those are numbers that are either the second best marks or the best marks of his career. So I think, it's going to be hard pressed to probably get to that 12 sack mark that he had as a rookie. He's currently, I think, sitting at 6 on the year, but he should be able to at least, I think, add to that total against the Commanders this week. And Sam Howell, who still has taken the most sacks, 55 on the season. The Dolphins, I think they're going to continue to lean on Bradley Chubb here with Jalen Phillips out for the year. He has been averaging 82% of snaps this season. I think they're going to continue to be in that range, or at least exceed that range here going forward. And feeling pretty good about Andrew Van Ginkel this week as well, who I have as like edge 15, just again, because of the matchup. Look, it's not Washington's offensive line that's been bad. It's Sam Howell just loves taking sacks. We call him the sack fetishist on this show, and that's kind of what he has been. He's just like 55 sacks is insane, and the season's not even quite close to being done yet. So we'll see what happens this week against a good pass rushing defensive line here. Christian Wilkins as well. He had 2 sacks last week, so he could keep his hot streak going. Zach Seiler has been solid. But yeah, other than that, it's a nice matchup for Miami's corner. So Washington giving up the second most tackles per game to the cornerback position. So Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, Kader Kohu, these are solid options to stream this week against a Washington team that is the most pass-heavy team in the NFL at 72% of plays. They are passing the ball. They've also targeted the wide receiver position more than any other team this season at 291 attempts to wide receivers. So I think we could see Ramsey, Kohu, Howard all be heavily involved this week and have a nice game. Not interested in their linebackers. I'm just not playing around with that this week until I see what the usage shakes out with Van Ginkel likely not playing off ball with Jalen Phillips out. And then the only other question is Javon Holland. He left last game with a knee injury. We don't know. He's currently still questionable, so they haven't really given a ton of solid information there. I don't know if he's going to play or not, but that's pretty much the only question mark for me for Miami. Otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward defense. How are you feeling about them?
I'll start with linebacker. I don't love that situation either with usage,
Yeah.
but if I was going to trust a guy, I think it might be David Long in a matchup like
Okay.
this, just because I think the tackle numbers probably have a little bit of a better shot there. I know Washington is trying to take a little bit of heat off of how, Brian Robinson has been pretty solid this
Mhm.
season. But Howell loves to get sacked, and I guess you don't lead the league in passing if you're not willing to stand back there and just get
Yeah.
obliterated behind a poor offensive line. So, yeah, Javon Holland would be a huge miss, especially coming off of a monster week with a 100-yard pick six. Probably a game that Miami can afford to sit him if it is some kind of knee issue, especially with a little bit of a brutal stretch coming up with, I think, still having to play Baltimore, Dallas, and Buffalo over the last couple weeks there. So might be a situation where they sit him at corner. Yeah, that's the matchups at corner. Jalen Ramsey has been a impact play monster. You're never going to get the tackle numbers with Jalen Ramsey.
Right.
Anyone who's played IDP for an extended period of time knows that. Cater Kohu might be a big one. I know Curtis Samuel kind of ate last week. I think he had 12 targets against Dallas. So might be a situation where you see some of that too in a potential blowout. Washington's not going to take Sam Howell off the field. They're going to let him get sacked for 4 entire quarters as they have all year. So, but yeah, Kohu's probably the one I like the most there. They've been kind of, taking Terry McLaurin a little bit out of the offensive game plan since Bieniemy's been there. It doesn't seem like he's having many of those big games. So, look to some of like the Logan Thomas and Curtis Samuel type of guys to kind of, extend the game in the running back. So maybe Cater who's probably like the guy I like the most there amongst that group. And Van Ginkel, I mean, is he back to the early season value is kind of what I have in my notes here with a question mark. He had that four sacks in a 4-game stretch with Phillips out. Good player, you know what I mean? One of those, all day looks like a New England Patriot type of, those 2000 Patriot team type players,
Yeah.
your Rob Ninkovich type of guy where it's like,
Yes.
you're not really sure what role he's playing, but he's always around the ball. So be curious to see what they do. I know Jason Pierre-Paul's coming in, but it sounds like, he'll probably hang on the practice squad until he's ready. I don't love anyone there. Christian Wilkins is there's no thought there, especially in defensive tackle premium. He's starting every single week, but has been nice to see him come on. And Seiler's another guy that, seems like you're not going to start him every week, but he's definitely in consideration if you're looking at kind of some depth there at defensive line. But yeah, overall, I don't know how much Miami's defense is going to be on the field. You know what I mean? It might be one of those games where they just kind of, they might be sitting starters. So I don't love to factor that into your decision making when you're starting guys. But when it comes to at least some of your big name guys, I think it's at least a thought that needs to cross your mind.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move to the next game on the list here, and it is the Los Angeles Chargers at the New England Patriots. John, where are we starting here with these two teams?
We'll start with our favorite Bill Belichick and the hating of all fantasy football. For me, all year it's been Peppers, Duggar, and actually Juwan Bentley, obviously having a great season. But a very poor matchup for Bentley in this one. So I don't love that. Obviously for him, Peppers has actually been the more consistent, scoring double digits in at least 9 of 11 games this year. Duggar has a few of the smash weeks this year, but the consistency really hasn't been there. And God, I wish that guy just didn't play for New England. I feel like he would be a perennial top 5 IDP safety every week if we could just get him away from Bill Belichick. I think he had a note in there about the JC Jackson revenge game. I'm a sucker for that. So, I'll buy in. But yeah, I don't love here. Miles Bryant's been solid this year at corner, so I haven't minded him too much. Amongst the defensive line, I know Godshaw's been coming on for defensive tackle premium leagues, so he's a guy that I've been, in some rough situations in, bye weeks, things like that, injuries I've kind of turned to time and time again, but not with any confidence. That's for sure. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I mean, if you have the ability to, again, going to the bye and losing some big linebackers there, probably not the option to sit Bentley. Definitely no other options on this team for sure in this matchup. So, but, I still think I'm probably in most cases rolling out both Peppers and Duggar this week. Solid matchup there. I think the, top half of the, 14th overall, the tackles, the safeties, I think you're going to get, those guys are just going to play snaps and they're going to produce. So, and then, from a cornerback standpoint, I do like, JC Jackson and Miles Bryant. If you're kind of, looking for a cornerback required here, I don't think there's a situation where I would put either of them in just in your leagues where you're just DB only. I wouldn't go that far. I don't love the matchup that much as it's kind of it is a positive matchup. I don't think I would risk it. And I mean, there's nothing on the defensive line that excites me on the New England side.
Yeah, nothing on the defensive line for me either. And yeah, I'm with you. I think just more for CB required leagues like JC Jackson, I have a CB 23, just because, like you said, 5th most tackles per game to the cornerback position from Justin Herbert and the Chargers there. And then, yeah, Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, definitely startable. Juwan Bentley, again, it's not a great matchup. 2nd fewest tackles per game to the linebacker position. So Bentley's like LB 31 for me. So on that kind of LB 3 range, and that's kind of where I'd keep him. For the most part, and again, even 6 teams on a bye, depends who you've lost this week, but he could be another option for sure, just as looking for those 100% snap guys. But yeah, that is New England essentially. So let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers next here, and we talked about them being a pretty straightforward defense. So anything that stands out to you for this Chargers team that's worth talking about this week?
Is I have in my notes is Kenneth Murray officially him? Is he?
Yeah.
I mean, he would look like he was on his way out of the league, and something turned this year. I don't know if it was the Kendricks injury or what it was, but he has been playing very well. I mean, I think 25 plus point games. Seems like that he is very comfortable playing in that defense. Made an absolutely banger of a hit on Gus Edwards on Sunday night that Kenneth Murray I don't think we've seen since Oklahoma. So very exciting to kind of see him, be in the running for a linebacker one season. So not a bad matchup there. 13 ball tackles to linebackers. Murray has been very consistent this season, so I like him there. Khalil Mack, obviously, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th coming, whatever it is. He's just the stats. I know the 6 sack game, but it just seems like he is living in backfields this year. He's
amazing.
Kind of bringing up the point, and I know we don't factor in age as much on the IDP side of things in fantasy football, especially dynasty. But I mean, fading some of these aging pass rushers is kind of being, hurting us a little bit, because some of these guys are having really good seasons really late into their career. So, that's a guy with Bosa out. I know we like Tuliapo as well. But I just think Max stats right now are, he's turned into a weekly starter guy that you should be considering every single week, where he was kind of a, situational pass rusher, we thought, in that system. Another guy I have there, I know the matchup isn't positive to the safety position, but Alohi Gilman has been really solid. Back-to-back 9 tackle games. I think 4 straight double-digit performances as well. I kind of alluded to, I had to check the numbers, and he's actually not, but I know he's posted, I think it's a career high coverage grade this year, but thought he would be playing a lot more coverage than he actually does, but not really. But I mean, he was all over the field against Baltimore last week, and I know it's coming at the price of Derwin James, but he's been really solid, and another guy that is still probably out there on waiver wires in some leagues. So he's a guy I kind of like this week. Don't love really much from the cornerback position, especially when Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi's throwing the ball on the other end. You're not going to get a ton of opportunities anyway. So
yeah, it sounds like it's going to be Bailey Zappi. I changed the matchup card from Mac Jones, because he wasn't even taking pass reps in practice today. It was Bailey Zappi and Malik Cunningham, I believe. So I took out the Mac Jones pressure to sack conversion rate numbers from the matchup card here. Those are Bailey Zappi's numbers being represented on the screen for those watching on YouTube. So he just slightly above average as far as avoiding sacks. So he's been decent, but small sample size, and it's not going to change anything for me for Khalil Mack, who's edge 8 this week. He's just been unreal. He's been so consistent now and been excellent. But yeah, I like the call there on Alohi Gilman. Nobody's really talking about him, and he's been solid. And I think he is he has an 81.9 coverage grade, like you said, seventh among safeties, and then an 83.4 overall grade, which is sixth among safeties. So he's been playing lights out. He's been amazing, which is really cool to see, and somebody to kind of look at here for those deeper leagues. But yeah, other than that, I mean, you pretty much nailed the Chargers there. So I think we can move on. And before we do, actually, we'll give a quick shout out here to our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. How does it work? You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will go more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. So last week we had, I think, Deron Bland over 4.5 tackles. That one cleared easily. He pretty much doubled that, I think. And then unfortunately, DeMarcus Lawrence did not get even a half sack last week. So that was a bummer. And Prize Picks, I don't know what's going on. We don't have any defensive props up on the website right now. We got to get those up there here before the Thursday game, but we'll see. So basically just repeating the picks that we had on Tuesday's waiver wire show with Nate and I. I got Ramondre Stevenson over 57.5 rushing yards. We saw him kind of take back the backfield this past week. Chargers, they've been about average against the run. They're giving up 4.2 yards per carry. And then Ramondre Stevenson, too, over 85 rushing yards in 3 straight games. So 57.5 on that larger workload should be nice. And then what Nate's pick was DeAndre Swift, under 56.5 rushing yards going against a very good San Francisco 49ers defense, especially against the run. So at Prize Picks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections. Go to prizepicks.com/PFF Fantasy. Use code PFF Fantasy for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/PFF Fantasy and use code PFF Fantasy for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, John, let's move to the Detroit Lions at the New Orleans Saints. It doesn't seem like we're going to have Alex Anzalone for his revenge game against the New Orleans Saints, unfortunately. So it sounds like he's dealing with like a hand or a wrist injury, something like that. So the only thing I could find is that he's expected to miss time. So it doesn't seem like he'll be ready for this game. So I think there's probably going to be hope that we're going to get the first round rookie Jack Campbell in on a larger role. I'm I guess hesitant. And I kind of represent that in the rankings because he's LB 45 for me this week. I'm just kind of waiting to see what it is because Derek Barnes has actually played ahead of Campbell the past 2 weeks, which I think could be telling in how the Lions are going to deploy these guys. While Anzalone is out for however long that might be, but it's also possible that neither player will be an every down linebacker and they'll deploy like a heavy rotation at the position with guys like Jalen Reeves-Maybin and Malcolm Rodriguez working in there. And that we've seen them do that as well. But that's kind of the part that has me kind of concerned about immediately plugging Jack Campbell into a lineup this week. I don't know that he's going to be that 100% snap player. Derek Barnes, I'd feel better about. I have him as like LB 35 this week. So really low end LB 3 if you do need somebody in a very good matchup against the Saints. That's really the only reason that he's still technically startable in those 3 LB leagues. But the Saints giving up the 4th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So that's what I kind of like about Derek Barnes this week. If you do have to trust somebody from Detroit, which I would suggest trying to avoid if you can. And then, yeah, other than that, I mean, Brian Branch, really solid. I got him as safety 7 this week. The Saints giving up the 9th most tackles to the safety position. He's really the only one I want to trust on a consistent basis there in Detroit. Tracy Walker, we've seen his snaps kind of go up and down as well, so not loving that. Jerry Jacobs has been solid at corner, but I got him as CB22. Aiden Hutchinson, I'm pretty much leaving him in lineups every week. Doesn't really matter the matchup, and it is a decent matchup, at least as far as the offensive line goes for the Saints. They have been a bottom 10 team in pass blocking grade. Aiden Hutchinson hopefully gets home with some sacks. I know he hasn't quite delivered in that regard lately, but the pass rush metrics and everything are still there for him. Derek Carr's done a nice job avoiding sacks, so that makes it a little bit harder, but Aiden Hutchinson still edge 11 for me this week. Yeah. Anybody else from Detroit for you?
No, I'd be curious. I don't have a ton of notes on this game, the coverage grades between Campbell and Barnes, because Kamara has been such a huge piece of the Saints passing game, especially with them being just absolutely decimated at wide receiver. Is kind of curious if I personally think Campbell's a better player, but I know like Mike Woolard was on Twitter earlier this week saying that it sounds like Barnes is probably going to get the green dot. So that would kind of lead you to believe that Campbell's going to stay in that kind of rotationary role. The fact that you're bringing up names like Jalen Reeves-Maybin makes me want to throw up. So, but again, it's Dan Campbell, and he's been starting Alex Anzalone for 6 years or so now. So, and
Feels
not
like
that Anzalone hasn't been bad, but he's extremely average. So,
yeah.
But yeah, love Branch, Tracy Walker. That. The peak value there, I think, for like a sell point was probably when Branch had missed those few games with the ankle.
Yeah.
Now that he's back, Kirby Joseph's in that lineup, and it's not great. The matchup's pretty good here. But Branch would be, kind of the guy I would rely on the most. And it does feel like he's been a little bit too quiet. So it feels like it might be one of those big Hutch weeks, whether it be an impact play or, a multiple sack game. But there isn't too much to like amongst that front seven of Detroit right now, outside of, Hutch and Anzalone when he was in there. I think if we would get a little bit more consistent, like, rock solid that Campbell was going to get those snaps, I think this is potentially a week that you would, love him with this matchup. But if it's going to be a rotation there, you're setting yourself up for failure. So
Yeah, that's why I just want to kind of avoid the group this week. And yeah, it would be interesting. Hopefully, if Derek Barnes gets the green dot, that'll kind of secure him at least a decent chunk of playing time. That doesn't necessarily guarantee even an every down role, but in a good matchup, he could be like a desperation flyer here this week. And yeah, you mentioned the coverage grades between Derek Barnes and Jack Campbell, so I did pull them up quickly here. Jack Campbell, 40.6 coverage grade, which is 77th among 78 linebackers. So obviously second last there, not great. And then Derek Barnes, 56.8 coverage grade. So not amazing either by any means, 56th among those 78 linebackers. So yeah, it's not a great group here right now. Obviously, we still have faith in Campbell for dynasty purposes, and he's still very much a rookie. So there's going to be some growing pains there. We have faith in him kind of getting better as his career goes along. But let's move to the New Orleans Saints side of things. And I don't have a ton on New Orleans because, I mean, I guess the only thing really is the Lions are giving up the 6th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. I've talked about the New Orleans Saints linebackers for a few weeks in a row and how inefficient they've been, and they've continued to be. Damari Davis was doing a little bit better there for a little bit, but then again, just dropped back down again last week. I have him as LB22, just being an every down linebacker in a really great matchup. It's hard to kind of bench those guys unless you have some really great options. Pete Werner, I have even lower. I have his LB28. He's been really disappointing, Pete Werner. I really liked him as after his rookie season. He was one of the highest graded run defenders in the league. He was doing everything right, and he was always in position to make tackles. And this year, been one of the most inefficient tacklers. So not sure what happened there. Change in defensive coordinator or whatever it was, but not loving Pete Werner as much as I thought I would this season. Tyrann Mathieu, also in a nice matchup here for the Saints safeties. The Lions giving up the 4th most tackles per game to the safety position. Tyrann Mathieu, another guy, not a very efficient tackler either, did get a couple picks last week, so that definitely helped him. But not a ton to love here for the Saints IDPs. other than probably Carl Granderson, who has been incredible this year. I think I'm as edge 14. Not a great matchup for pass rushing purposes because the Lions offensive line has been really great pass blockers. Jared Goff doesn't take a lot of sacks, even though Rashawn Gary got to him 3 times on Thanksgiving. Overall, he's been very good at avoiding sacks, and it's at least a good matchup for potential tackle floor. So I like Carl Granderson. Cameron Jordan left last game with like an ankle injury or something like that. So we'll see if he's able to go or not. But it would basically be Carl Granderson for me. How about you?
Yeah, Saints have been flirting with it for a few years now on borrowed time, keeping the Demario Davises, the Tyrann Matthews, the Cam Jordans. It is nice. Like we thought the world of Pete Warner last year. He's been like shockingly awful this year, like to the point where like if you have him as, which I did a couple, at least one startup this year, it was like a linebacker 2 or 3. You were comfortable with him in that role, and I mean he's not even worthy of like a linebacker 4 at this point. He's been so bad. Demario Davis, you can't expect much of. He was, kind of on that Quan Alexander, that type of thing. Levante David, where you're like, nobody wants this guy. He's still pretty decent. And like you said, he had like those few weeks there where you're like, all right, we're going to get one of those seasons out of Demario. And then, just kind of coming back down to earth. I had a little bit more hope for Marcus May too. I know he dealt with the suspension and he just hasn't been kind of as we expected. And then, I think Alontae Taylor's been pretty solid at corner, but, not a great matchup here. And, Granderson's been great. I think a lot of us had kind of called out a potential breakout for him because we had kind of seen it coming, especially with Davenport kind of fully out of the picture now and not having to deal with his injuries and in and out of the lineup. So, but yeah, really disappointing Saints defense this year from an IDP perspective. There hasn't been like a whole lot there. Tyrann Mathieu, I think I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would guarantee a big bulk of his production is strictly on impact plays. I think he had the pick 6 against New England. He had 2 picks last week. It's, Tyrann Mathieu, again, is just never going to be one of those guys who's going to be a high volume tackler. But yeah, it's, at this point, he is worthy of at least a stream here and there because of the impact plays. But as much as the favorable matchup from a tackle perspective to linebacker and safety, it's just like those guys haven't shown us enough where we're comfortable in week 13 starting them in our lineups, so.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. All right, let's move to the next game on the list. It is the Carolina Panthers at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Where do you want to start with this one, John?
We'll start on the Tampa Bay side. Obviously, Devin White, that regression from linebacker 1 season overall is just, full tank mode at this point. Savorsky Dennis, nice last week. I think 8 tackles over his last 80 snaps, but I think this entire Tampa Bay defense has the questionable tag with them this week, at least all the relevant IDPs. So Antoine Winfield, probably a smash matchup for him, 10th most tackles per game to safeties that Carolina's allowing. But Ryan Neal, the dips and snaps there is a bit shocking. I know he's been solid. I think he dealt with an injury there too. The cornerback matchup I like too with Carlton Davis and I think the potential of Jamel Dean to be back, obviously it being so early in the week, we can't really speak with certainty there, but if those guys are back, that's a solid matchup. Be interested to see what happens now with that dumpster fire of Carolina. How this typically works. You fire a coach and, the offense has this 30-point output. So if Carolina is going to do that, it's definitely going to be through the air because they're atrocious backfield. So could be a sneaky good week for, I would definitely have more faith in Carlton Davis at this point, but if Dean is deemed active, I think he's definitely, especially in cornerback required, a guy that you're definitely trying to put some stock into. Among that front, I know the tackles aren't really there from a matchup standpoint from the Carolina side, but Joe Tyron Shoyinka had a big game last week. I think Shaq Barrett's, kind of been good in spots. This is probably a good matchup for those guys especially if you're trying to replace some top edges that might be on the bye this week. So I really hope Savorsky Dennis plays, because it doesn't sound like Levante David will. Doesn't look like he didn't even participate in walkthroughs. So KJ Britt, I don't have a ton of faith in. It doesn't seem like they want to play him unless it's going to be in an emergency situation there. So I did like Dennis at Pitt, so I'd be curious to see how that goes, if he can stay on the field and kind of work alongside Devin White, who I know is also injured there with the hip. So definitely would have expected some more, maybe some of those bigger games that we've seen from White in the past, but I don't know if it's the injury or just the fact that he's not as good as we expected him to be, but kind of a big letdown with him.
Yeah, White, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, he is the lowest graded linebacker this season, 39.2 overall out of 79 linebackers. He's dead last. So former 5th overall pick, not quite living up to that, and he really hasn't. Basically his entire career, right? So not loving that from Devin White. I think he nailed everything else too. I love the cornerbacks. We'll see if Jamel Dean can play or not. Levante David, like you said, didn't practice today, so not a great sign. We'll see what happens here the rest of the week, but otherwise, Servassier Dennis, hopefully he's healthy, like you said. And then on the Carolina side of things, I'll start us off here. Just Brian Burns, I have his edge 7 this week. It's not like the best matchup. Brian Burns hasn't been amazing by any means, but I will say, like, Baker Mayfield, we always give him credit for doing a nice job avoiding sacks this season. He had one of the top 5 pressure to sack conversion rates in the league, at 5 best, I should say, at 14% going into last week. But then the Colts, of all teams, who are one of the highest sack converting teams in the league somehow, landed six sacks on him. So he had a pressure to sack conversion rate in that game of 60%. So it wasn't great for Baker Mayfield last week. So we'll see if that is an outlier or if it becomes a trend. Either way, Panthers don't have a lot of pass rushers on that defensive line. It is literally Brian Burns, and that's it. Derek Brown on the interior, not much of a pass rusher there, more of a tackler, and he leads all defensive linemen in tackle efficiency, who have played at least 50% of snaps at 10.9%. So for you, anything on the Carolina side that you want to go into here?
No, I would say that the NFC South is a killer to IDP managers. There's just been very little consistency there. Frankie Louvu is going to be in your lineups every week. He's really the only one of any type of IDP relevance. I think you hit it with Burns. The numbers really aren't great, but he's getting to the quarterback. He's getting those sacks. So he's still a fantastic edge. So he's going to be in your lineup. Derek Brown has been very, very good this year, especially in defensive tackle premium. I know I've been riding him in a few IDP only leagues this year, and it's been kind of a nice surprise there. But Von Bell, Xavier Woods, this guy's getting hurt. Like it's really has been a letdown this year. So I would say, when we're looking at the Atlanta Falcons as like the top IDP team in that division, and kind of speaking about how much Arthur Smith hates fantasy football, just like, it's been a rough year in that division trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it's not good, like you said. And yeah, people were upset with Frankie Louvu last week. He kind of ghosted IDP managers with like a 2-tackle game, whatever it was. But he played every snap last week, so nothing to be concerned about, at least going forward there. He should have a better week this week, even like a neutral matchup here. But yeah, like you said, Von Bell left the game last week. He's questionable right now, so maybe like an Alex Cook would be an option. But again, it's not a good matchup. Tampa Bay giving up the 29th most tackles to safety, so we're just kind of avoiding this this whole situation here. All right, let's go to here we go. There's a good game. Game of the week. San Francisco 49ers at the Philadelphia Eagles, and we'll start with the Eagles linebackers here, because no Nakobe Dean, obviously on IR, and likely no Zach Cunningham either. He left last game with an injury, so the Eagles are down to Nicholas Morrow and Christian Ellis right now. This is a tough situation here because Morrow's been okay in spots. We haven't really seen a big enough sample size from Christian Ellis. Probably not going to be an every down role for Christian Ellis, so I have him as LB 39 this week. Nicholas Morrow, I feel a little bit better about. It's a neutral matchup essentially for tackles per game to the linebacker position, but he's LB 25 for me. There's just a few other guys that I like a little bit better. The IDPs that I really like this week for the Eagles, though, are their safeties, Kevin Byard and Reed Blankenship. They have been excellent all season long, and the 49ers are giving up the most tackles per game to the safety position, just ahead of the team that they're playing against, the Philadelphia Eagles. And then they're giving up actually the fewest tackles per game to the cornerback position, so don't love it for Darius Slade, James Bradbury, but also a nice matchup on the Eagles side of things. Hassan Reddick, who has been awesome all season long. He should avoid Trent Williams this week, the 49ers left tackle, who is one of the best in the leagues, which means he should get Colton McKivitz. Brock Purdy not giving up a ton of sacks so far this season, but Hassan Reddick has been able to get home. He's been able to deliver. He's been awesome. So I have him as edge 9 this week, but the other guys like Josh Sweat, I have his edge 25. He does draw Trent Williams this week, plus the combination of Brock Purdy doing a good job at avoiding sacks makes it a little tougher for him. What does help is that the 49ers are giving up the sixth most tackles per game to the defensive line position. So guys like maybe Jalen Carter, for example, have a little bit of a better production floor as well. So I have him as DT 12 this week. But anything that I missed there for the Eagles side of things for you?
No, I'll just speak on the linebacker portion there. Zach Cunningham's going to be a killer. I don't think Ellis is very good. Nick Morrow, I do actually like. He reminds me a lot of Anthony Hitchens, when he was kind of in the game for a few years, where a linebacker that can play any of the three positions there. But a bit concerning that 23 of his 47 total tackles of the year came in two games. I think he had an 11 tackle game and a 12 tackle game last week. Obviously a 50-point performance on his resume is obviously pretty big. I think he led the team in tackles, had a few impact plays there. Hit it with nail on the head with Byard and Blankenship. Those guys are smash starts. It just doesn't really, they almost seem matchup proof at this point. Kevin Byard, it doesn't matter where he's going to play. He's going to play every single snap and he's going to do it pretty well. So, complete fade on the cornerback position. I don't want any part of that. From the defensive lineman position, your defensive tackle premium. Jalen Carter on name value alone and just watching that guy in a primetime matchup is extremely fun. So you're going to want him in your lineups. I do like a little bit of Sweat and Reddick this week. I don't love meshing up against Trent Williams, but I think the six most tackles allowed to defensive linemen, and San Fran's going to want to run the ball because that's what they do. There's still going to be some opportunities there for Sweat to kind of stop a few of those stretch plays and those zone reads. So, I'm not super confident on it, but I don't think he's a complete fade for me, even though Trent Williams is, getting that recognition that he deserves of being potentially the best player in all of football right now. So, at least from his own teammates. But, I think this is a situation, just to kind of circle back to the opener there, is that I think if Shaq Leonard, I should say, somehow makes his way into that Philly facility and leaves without a contract, I think that's, a big mistake on their part, because some of the depth that Philly let go is really what's going to haunt them, or is haunting them on the defensive side. They are getting away with it, with some of these close wins on offense. But, a TJ Edwards type linebacker, just having one of those type guys makes all the world of difference. We see the season that Zach Cunningham is having when he was been left for dead, by multiple teams. So it is kind of nice. I think if you're looking for a linebacker there in at least so-so matchup, I don't mind Morrow. I think he's probably going to be the one that's trusted the most there. Nakobe Dean's really, really sad for IDP managers, because this was going to be the year. So
yeah. Yeah, still hope for Dean for dynasty purposes, obviously, because they have nobody else. I still can't believe they let TJ Edwards go. But yeah, it always helps when you get Jalen Carter at the 9th overall pick, and he's already the second highest graded defensive tackle as a rookie here, which is just insane. He's been unreal. And then, yeah, let's go to the 49ers side of things here. And I guess starting with, I mean, look, I don't have to talk about their linebackers, Fred Warner, Drake Greenlaw. We're starting them. Doesn't really matter the matchup. Like I said, Eagles giving up the second most tackles per game to the safety position. So Jair Brown is kind of interesting. I know he had a quieter week in his first week replacing Talanoa Hufanga last week, but I got him as safety 14 this week, strictly because of the matchup. I think there's potential there for him to be a nice streaming option and have his first big game of his career, basically, here against the Eagles in what should be a very high scoring game. Well, at least high offense kind of game. So there's going to be involvement there for Brown, I think, and the safeties. So like him, I mean, yeah, other than that, I mean, Nick Bosa, what else do I got to say? Doesn't really matter matchup for him either. You're starting him. Chase Young, I have as edge 17. It sounds like Lane Johnson is probably going to be back this week at right tackle. The other option on the other side is Jordan Mailata. These guys are really good offensive tackles, so makes it a little bit tougher. But Chase Young has been really solid this season, so still like him in that edge 2 range. But he's come a little bit lower for me this week, or at least he's been a little bit lower for me with the 49ers since he's gone over there, because the snaps haven't quite been the same that they were in Washington. So that's kind of hurt him, and he's dropped a little bit in my rankings, but still like Chase Young quite a bit and what he's done this year. And then other than that, Javon Hargrave, revenge game here. Another one here going against the Eagles. We could see him have hopefully a potentially nice game, even though it isn't one of the better matchups for pass rushing purposes. But the Eagles are giving up, or the 49ers are the Eagles are giving up the 10th most tackles per game to the defensive line position. So maybe there's some hope there for Javon Hargrave, even though he's not really a tackling defensive tackle. There's still at least a nice floor to be had if he can do it. Anything else for you for the 49ers?
No, I think you hit it there. You're not, nothing changes your opinion when you have all-world linebacker like Fred Warner. Yeah. What I mean? So, Jair Brown, I definitely think, it's going to take some time, replacing Hufanga and kind of what he brings even from an energy level to that defense, to that secondary is, not something that you're going to replace overnight. But I do think I like him, and, he's going to be fine, As far as defensive line, Hargrave is where I was going. Some of the revenge game stuff, and the fact that Philly hasn't looked as good as I think the record shows, if we will, on that side of it. So Jalen Hurts has been a little bit turnover prone, so especially when it comes to fumbling the ball in the backfield and stuff. So Hargrave can find a way to kind of get some penetration, maybe live in that backfield. I know his tackle numbers haven't been that good, but when you got Nick Bosa over there, who's probably going to beat on that tackle, there's going to be an opportunity there to kind of get maybe some cleanup sacks, so or some pressures in there, who knows. But yeah, not a ton to like on the San Fran side. I love Chase Young. I wish the best for him. I think that move was obviously just for a win now move for San Francisco. Low risk, high reward there. We're going to see Chase Young play somewhere else next year, but hopefully he can kind of turn in a couple good games down the stretch and show us what he's made of. It's nice to see him and Bosa back together, but I don't think we're yet to see that game of what those guys are capable of. So, who knows? I know they've been, pretty pissed off since that NFC Championship debacle last year. So if they can make it through that game, I could see, San Fran winning that game on defense, which I know is something that they would love to do. So,
yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I'm really looking forward to that game. But let's move on to a game that maybe not as excited about here. The Cleveland Browns at the Los Angeles Rams. Where do you want to start with these two teams?
We can start with the Rams. Ernest Jones back, there. Obviously, the Browns allowing the most tackles per game. It does really kind of suck that this Rams system is a one linebacker system. It doesn't seem like they're gonna, even Ernest Jones kind of playing, Rob in there to Bobby Wagner last year. It's just, it doesn't seem like it's a system that two linebackers are going to thrive in consistently. So Ernest Jones, I know, I've been dealing with that knee or ankle, I think, almost all year, off and on, but seems like he's back. I know we kind of had a Twitter exchange this week about the Rams resting their starters last week. Don't expect that in this probably ugly game. But yeah, plus matchup there. Ernest Jones is, obviously all the numbers point to that being the start of the week there amongst linebackers. Safety position, the Rams don't give you a lot there. I know we had hope for Russ Yeast, who was, kind of waiver wire darling there preseason. It's just been a little roller coaster. Linebacker, I know Kendrick's been playing really well as of late, but I mean, you're looking at probably Joe Flacco from what it sounds like. So I don't know what that does to the Browns passing game, but I find it probably very hard to believe how late in the game he took that hit and the gruesomeness of it that DTR ends up playing this week. So I would expect it to be pretty ugly there. Obviously, the defensive line is also a money matchup there for the Rams. Aaron Donald, you're never going to not start, especially in a defensive tackle premium. Byron Young, I know, has been very good in spots this season. So I don't love anyone there, but I think when you're looking at some of those situations that we've spoken before, where you're looking at defensive line and you're looking between Seattle and the Colts and some of these teams that just have a lot of guys who just kind of rotate in there, obviously having a matchup with a team allowing the most tackles to defensive linemen, especially in the late window, this might be one that you want to, start one of these guys instead of an early matchup where you're not consistently going to get that production. So Aaron Donald's not going to be a guy that's going to be available to you whatever after he's on, he's staying on. But I think Michael Hoyt, so a couple guys like that might be available. So you might be able to pick up like one of those guys to get you some late production. But I don't love this matchup overall.
Yeah, and even like for DT required leagues, just for tackle purposes, the rookie Kobe Turner has been really solid as well, right? So, I think you nailed it. I mean, Ernest Jones is LB2 for me this week, like you said. I think it was how dare a 5-6 team rest their starters. That definitely made me laugh. So on the Cleveland side of the ball, Myles Garrett dealing with a shoulder injury. They said he's day to day, and it also sounds like he definitely has some structural damage to his shoulder, but he's determined to play through it. So we'll see what that looks like on the field. It's still Myles Garrett, so I don't know how you bench him. You probably can't. If he's playing, this guy's like a superhuman. So, shoulder injury for him is probably more like a stub toe for us, I'm assuming, which is why he's trying to play through it. The guy's not human. So he's looking to win Defensive Player of the Year this year. So I can't imagine that he's going to want to sit. So hopefully he can continue to play at a high level. He's going up against Alaric Jackson, the left tackle there for the Rams, 59.6 pass block grade. Hasn't been amazing by any means. So not a bad matchup for him as far as pass rushing goes. But other than that, I mean, the Browns are just a weird team for IDP purposes, right? Like we like Grant Delpit, obviously at safety, but how about, did you have any trust in the Cleveland linebackers this week, especially assuming if Anthony Walker's back in the lineup from his hamstring injury?
No, this linebackers room sucks. Good players, but just like the usage isn't there. I know JOK last week with 12 tackles was huge, but it's just, I think you're setting yourself up for failure in some of these situations, and especially one where you got a team allowing the 25th most tackles to linebackers in a situation that you really don't trust on a week-to-week basis, and maybe even in a plus matchup. I mean, this is just kind of, like you would have to be really desperate here. So,
yeah. Yeah, 100%. All right, let's move to Sunday night football here as we get close to wrapping this thing up. It is the Kansas City Chiefs at the Green Bay Packers, and let's start with the Packers side of things. Rashawn Gary is the player I think I want to start with here because I talked about not loving his matchup last week, and all he did was deliver 3 sacks plus a forced fumble in there. So that really made me look stupid, which sucks because I loved Rashawn Gary all season long. And of course, the one time I'm like, not as much this week. I think I still had him as like edge 14 or something, but I was hesitant about putting him into lineups for those shallower leagues. And yeah, he delivered in a big way. But they also moved him to the right side of the defensive line as well to avoid Penei Sewell, which is something they haven't really done all year. They've always kept him on kind of the left side of the defensive line. So they did move him around, which could be a key for him kind of going forward for those teams going up against teams with elite pass blocking offensive tackles. And not that the Chiefs have any of those elite offensive tackles by any means, but he is still going against the toughest quarterback to sack in the league in Patrick Mahomes this week. So still just outside that top 12 for me, Rashawn Gary at edge 13, but he's one of those players that has just been, again, so dominant. He looks so good out there. And yeah, he's tough to bench. And when you do, he puts up a 3-sack performance. So that could be a killer for you. Other than that, the Packers, I mean, Devondre Campbell is questionable. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, if he can't go, ideally you'd have Isaiah McDuffie because this is one of the later games, obviously Sunday Night Football. Otherwise, if there's no clear news, you might want to just avoid Devondre Campbell, put in somebody from the earlier games. And Quay Walker's LB10 for me this week. It's a fairly neutral matchup for linebackers, but still like Quay Walker quite a bit. And then figuring out the safety position, Jonathan Owens and Anthony Johnson Jr. were the starters last week, but Rudy Ford and Darnell Savage were out. Darnell Savage could potentially return from IR this week. Rudy Ford could potentially return from injury. So definitely have to pay attention to injury reports and practice reports leading up into this game, because if those guys are back, it could hurt the playing time for a Jonathan Owens or especially an Anthony Johnson Jr. If only one of them is back, still feel pretty good about Owens being in the lineup. Otherwise, we may have to kind of really pay attention here if you're banking on starting Jonathan Owens specifically. But yeah, anything else for Green Bay for you?
No, I know Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker just can't seem to play together this season.
Yeah.
So we've seen a lot of Isaiah McDuffie, which has led to 4 10-plus tackle games. That's what Isaiah McDuffie is going to give you. That's what he was in college. He's a tackling machine. He's going to tackle whatever moves. He's probably not a guy that you want out there covering anybody at all. But if there's a ball carrier in the area, he's going to get him to the ground. So I have a ton of shares of either Campbell or Walker, probably more on the Walker side. McDuffie has been a guy I've been picked up for insurance and has been a very, very good asset all year. Jonathan Owens was a smash start for me last week, and he did not disappoint, thankfully. I've never been a Darnell Savage fan. I don't know how, even when he comes back, I mean, I think Owens has 8 tackles in 4 straight games. He's the better player.
Been awesome, yeah.
Yeah. From a cornerback perspective, Keyshawn Nixon, he's been okay in spots. Hasn't been too bad, especially from like a tackling standpoint. Rashawn Gary just got you because it's Ohio State. It was Ohio State Michigan week. He's Michigan guy coming back home. He wanted to put on a show.
There you go.
But yeah, it is really tough. And I mean, going back to the Harold Landry point too, sometimes when these guys miss a season for an ACL or something like that, it just takes time to get back and get the trust back. And I don't really know, but you don't ever expect those blow up games. Sometimes I'll write those up in my article to the point where I know, like, I'm almost doing it sacrilegiously to hope that he has a blow up game because I'm still starting him somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, there isn't too much outside of that. I think, assuming Campbell misses time, I think McDuffie's probably in your lineup every week, this week. And as far as Owens, I mean, unless we get some clear positive news on Savage, I think Owens has been good enough that he should be in your lineup as well. And then amongst that defensive line position, I just don't see you sitting Rashawn Gary at any point after that Thanksgiving
No.
showing.
Yeah, definitely hard to just sit him after that. How about on the Kansas City side? So Kansas City, they did open the practice window for Nick Bolton, which is interesting. So I doubt that he plays this week, but at least nearing a return here. So still safe to start Drew Tranquil up until Nick Bolton returns. Once Nick Bolton is back in the lineup, I don't think you're starting Drew Tranquil at that point. So we've just seen that usage obviously be too clear there for the way Kansas City uses these guys. So other than that, Justin Reed, the only startable safety, really on the low end safety 2 side for me. McDuffie and Snead at cornerback have been really solid. Chris Jones, obviously DT required, even defensive line leagues. He's too much of a blow up threat that he's, where he could get those multi-sack games. So he stays in lineups. But the one player I did want to kind of highlight was George Karlaftis. I have him as edge 16 this week. He's been a really consistent IDP option on the edge this season, despite not having elite pass rush metrics. Still having a better year than his rookie season. He's improved his pass rush grade to 64.9, pressure rate 15.6, win rate 12.3. Those are significant increases from his rookie year, which is really promising for Karlaftis. He's also averaging a very strong 77% snap share on the year, which helps his production floor. So you like to see that as well. He's going up against Zach Tom, the right tackle there for Green Bay, which isn't an easy matchup. He's been pretty good, but what helps him too, at least for that production floor again, and the playing time, is that the Packers are yielding 18.3 tackles per game to the defensive line position. So 7th most in the league, which definitely helps a high volume IDP like a Karlaftis as well. So wanted to kind of highlight him there because he's been having a nice year. But anybody else on Kansas City that you want to talk about before we go to the last game?
No, I know Spagnola playing guys that at that rate of snap share is really just due to injury. But it's wild that Karlaftis is kind of sporting some of those numbers. Tranquil, you're starting until Bolton gets back. I think they're probably looking for Bolton to come back for the Buffalo game, obviously, which would be a huge one. But Tranquil, 9 straight games of 10 fantasy points or more. Justin Reed, another one you hit it there. I know the matchup's not great, but he's had 15 fantasy points in each of the last 2 games. So that's a solid start there. Green Bay has been red hot with kind of 2 big wins there over the Chargers and then the Lions, but that probably stops this week in a pretty ugly game. The Chiefs defense seems to kind of put the clamps on everyone. So I don't love the matchup there. I think if I'm going anywhere, it's amongst the defensive line. I think, some of those, we spoke about some of those, hey, who am I going to start? Why not go to a primetime matchup? Mike Dana has been really solid in spots this year. I mean, I wouldn't expect a huge game from him, but Chris Jones is never quiet, especially in these primetime matchups. So he's going to cause some problems. And, I love everything he said about Karlaftis. That was a big hit for a lot of IDP managers and obviously the Chiefs too. A player that I don't think a lot of people were expecting a ton from, but has been very, very good, not even full 2 seasons in. Hate the Chiefs for what they not keeping Nick Bolton healthy because this was supposed to be his linebacker 1 season overall. But we live and we learn on those. But not a ton to love there in a matchup like this. I don't expect Green Bay to continue to move the ball that well. Getting Aaron Jones back might be big, but I'm not 100% sure that happens either. If they roll into there with the same offense that they rolled in against Detroit, I think it's going to be a vastly different game. So, and that one being at home on Sunday Night Football, it's going to be a lot of Chris Collinsworth, Patrick Mahomes love. So might be a blowout potential there as well.
I like it. All right, let's go to the last game of the week, Monday Night Football. It is the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Cincinnati Bengals at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Where do you want to start with these 2 teams?
I'll start with Jacksonville. I know a lot of these matchups aren't very good. Jacksonville allowing bottom five to linebackers and defensive linemen alike, kind of in the bottom half of the league there against DBs as well. So there isn't a ton there. Devin Lloyd has been kind of surprising this year, better than expected, considering I think at one point Chad Mumu was supposed to take his job either end of last season or beginning of this season. But I think Lloyd has double-digit fantasy points in 8 of 9 games this year. So he's been really kind of a pleasant surprise there. I don't need to talk about Olakun. He's all world. You know what I mean? You're never going to sit that guy. Trayvon Walker has been kind of very poor this year. It's been a little bit disappointing. Josh Allen, another guy. It doesn't really matter if, the opposing team doesn't allow a single sack all year. That guy's going to find a way to cause havoc. So, but yeah, not a ton there. Rayshon Jenkins is a guy that I've been riding for years here, getting him off waiver wires, but he's been, very inconsistent. And I do like the combo of him and Cisco. And of course, when my boy Antonio Johnson gets on the field at some point, but yeah, it's there isn't a ton to like on that side of it. And then with our first full sample size, 4 quarters worth of Jake Browning and the Cincinnati Bengals offense last week, leaves a lot to be desired. So.
Yeah. That was tough. And at least should be good for Josh Allen. Like you said, the Bengals, the 6th worst pass blocking unit in the league. Browning already taking sacks at a very high rate, 32% pressure to sack conversion rate, which is 12 sacks. And Josh Allen has 12 sacks on the year, which is a career high for him, which is awesome to see. And like you said, Foye, Devin Lloyd, they're starting. Rayshon Jenkins kind of in that low end safety 2 range this week. But on the Cincinnati side of things, it is a different story, a nicer matchup here for the linebackers, right? So 2nd most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So Logan Wilson, who is questionable. So he left last game with a sprained ankle really late in the game. So if he's playing, obviously you love him. Ideally, you would have like a Jermaine Pratt or a Akeem Davis-Gaither available to you just as a backup. I mean, Pratt probably not as widely available as a Davis-Gaither, but there's at least Davis-Gaither not rostered in a ton of leagues where you can pivot there, and you're not going to get an every down player, but it's at least a strong enough matchup for the linebacker position that he could be somebody that you're able to plug in if you're waiting on Logan Wilson up into the last minute where he's announced as inactive or active. But I have him as LB3 right now, assuming he plays, which we don't know for sure if he will. It's not a great matchup for safeties. 28th most tackles per game to the safety position. Still like Dax Hill. He's been awesome. Jordan Battle, I like. We've talked about Jordan Battle, obviously, this offseason, but they haven't quite given him the full reins of an every down role just yet. That's been the only thing. Nick Scott still somehow working in there, which is concerning. But Jordan Battle, 86% 2 weeks ago, 83% last week. So not an every down role. That's the only thing. Once he gets that 100% role, he's another player that we might be able to trust here. Jaguars are also giving up the most tackles per game to the cornerback position. Cam Taylor-Britt, also questionable, but a really good IDP option. He would be CB2 for me this week if he does play. Mike Hilton, also definitely a startable option. And then, yeah, their defensive line guys. I mean, Trey Hendricks and Sam Hubbard have been excellent. You playing those guys for the most part. But anybody else on the Bengals side of things for you?
No, I love your point about, I mean, if you're the manager who has Logan Wilson at that point, I think your pivot move there is to pick up Davis-Gaither. I mean, yeah. I don't think you're going to see Jermaine Pratt available and outside of, very, 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 thin leagues. I do think a good point on Jordan Battle as well, it reeks of the Dax Hill situation from a year ago, is when, maybe this time next year, it's, getting Dax Hill and Battle in there on 90 to 100% of the snaps is what we want to see, and probably what's going to be best for their defense as well. According to Sleeper, I don't know, I know it's early in the week, but it sounds like Cam Taylor-Britt's going to be inactive. So I think that's, probably obviously Hilton. I like the point on Hilton. I think over 15 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5. So that's big. I mean, obviously with the fact that Cincinnati's kind of being crippled on throwing the ball, it's probably not going to help his numbers a ton. And absolutely like over the moon happy for Trey Hendrickson, and I think only 2 games this season without at least a half sack. He has just been awesome. Like, so, like Josh Allen alike, like it's really nice to see like those like good guys in the league putting up like those really career type years. It is a really good matchup for the Cincinnati defense in a few different levels there. It's about kind of picking the right guys there. So Davis Gaither is a great pivot if Logan Wilson is not to play, and it's nice that it's in the same game because if you're up against it, at least you have a guy there. And from the cornerback position, as great of a position as a matchup that is, I don't know how much I trust the Cincinnati offense to get first downs in a game like this when you're playing against a Jacksonville unit who is extremely efficient at getting first downs and moving the chains. So, overall was a lot more excited for this game prior to the Burrow injury.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were, unfortunately, and this has been the story of the season with all these quarterback injuries. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for us. We go a little bit longer. We went about 2 hours, but hey, when we get the John cast going, we're talking IDPs. We definitely we get to gabbing, and we got lots of information to give here. So thank you very much to everybody for tuning in and for listening. Again, if you're on the YouTube, please like and subscribe to the PFF Fantasy YouTube channel. It is a huge help for us. And most of all, a big thank you to the great John Glosser. John, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I really do appreciate giving up such a big chunk of your night tonight.
No problem. Thanks for having me on. I'd love to sit there and talk football with you a little. Sometimes maybe in this forum a little too much. Maybe they want us back to just talking rookies where there's only 7 guys we could talk about.
Hey, it's good. It's good. We get to talk about as much as we want here. That's the beauty of the timestamps in the episode description, right? People can jump around, find the games they're looking for. You don't have to listen to us, but if you did, we really do appreciate it. And John, before you do go, please let everybody know where they could find more of you and your work as well.
At Glosser13 on Twitter /X, whatever we call it these days, and dynastynerds.com. All IDP rankings are up there. You can find those pretty much anywhere. And then we do a start sit where we cover one player from every game outside of the top 36. So, be on the lookout for that. That should be out, later this week when we kind of get more clear path on some of these injuries and inactives. I don't like to kind of take credit for guys that are not playing. Doesn't make me look too good there. And also this week, wrapping up Q3 of the season with the Q3 IDP Nerds report will be out. So take a look into that. There's a lot of data in there of things that I find relevant to me when I'm trying to set lineups and things that I work through throughout the year that help me become a better IDP player. I try to give that to the people and see, I've gotten some positive feedback on it, and people are really, interested in some of the, the tidbits that kind of come in there. So be on the lookout for that. And again, just want to praise John for all the IDP content he's putting out and really like helping everyone out there. I know like there's rankings everywhere. I tell them all the time that we can find anywhere, but having some of that knowledge of team building aspects and just the extra data points and the pass rush win rates and the IDP report every week coming out specific to the last game is like, it is a very, what have you done for me lately game, and being able to have that from week to week is so huge. And I know I could speak for, 100% of the community that like, we sincerely appreciate all the work you're putting in, sir.
Well, I really appreciate the kind words, John. I'm happy to help. It's what I get paid to do, so I'm very, very happy to do it. And yeah, I appreciate that. And definitely for everybody, go check out John's work as well. One of the great people here in the IDP world and one of the great minds as well. So check him out over on Dynasty Nerds at Glosser13 as well. And then yeah, you could find my work on PFF.com. Like John mentioned, the IDP fantasy report is out every week for free up on PFF.com. We got all the snap shares, utilization, waiver wire targets, all that stuff in there. IDP rankings will be up on the website as well by the time this episode comes out, as well as the wide receiver man zone coverage report and the offensive line, defensive line matchups to target and avoid as well will be up on Friday. Thank you again very much for everybody listening. Good luck getting into those fantasy playoffs. We will be back next week. And until next time, peace out. Bye.